She was always early to class, even when no one noticed. She would sit near the back, close enough to see the piano but far enough to stay invisible. While others talked loudly or laughed, she stayed quiet, hands folded, eyes calm. Some teachers saw her silence as lack of interest. Others thought she was slow to learn. No one ever asked her why she listened so closely every time the piano was played. Music class was her favorite, even though it was also the hardest. The piano stood at the front of the room like something alive. When keys were pressed, she felt something deep inside her chest move. It was not excitement alone. It was memory. It was comfort. It was pain. But she never said any of that out loud. She came from a home where noise was common but music was rare. Life there was not easy. There were days when electricity went out, days when meals were small, and nights when sleep was broken by worry. Still, whenever she heard a piano sound from a neighbor's window or a video on a phone, she stopped everything to listen. That sound felt like a promise she didn't fully understand yet. At school, the music teachers focused on students who spoke up. Those who raised hands were praised. Those who made mistakes loudly were corrected. Quiet students were often ignored. She noticed this early and learned to stay even quieter. She did not want attention. Attention felt dangerous when you were unsure of yourself. There was one piano in the classroom. It was old, with keys that stuck and pedals that squeaked. When lessons were over and students rushed out, she often stayed behind for a moment, pretending to pack slowly. Sometimes the teacher left early, trusting the room would be locked later. In those moments, she would walk up to the piano and lightly touch the keys, barely making a sound. Just enough to feel the vibration. She never played a full note in class. She was afraid. Afraid of being laughed at. Afraid of proving everyone right. But more than that, she was afraid of showing how much the piano mattered to her. Some things felt too personal to share. Other students noticed her habits. They whispered that she was strange. Some said she was pretending to be interested in music to get special treatment. Others said she would never be good because talent was obvious and she was not. Their words reached her ears even when they thought she wasn't listening. The teachers had their own opinions. One of them believed students like her slowed down the class. Another thought discipline was needed to push quiet students into reality. They talked among themselves, saying that interest without ability was useless. They didn't say her name, but she knew they meant her. As weeks passed, an announcement was made. Every student would be tested on the piano. Not just simple scales, but real pieces. It was meant to prepare them for future opportunities, the teachers said. Some students were excited. Others were nervous. She felt something else entirely. Her stomach tightened when she heard the news. She knew she had never played properly in front of anyone. She knew her hands would shake. Still, deep inside, there was a small spark of hope. A chance, maybe, or an ending. At home, she practiced in silence. There was no piano, but there was an old keyboard with broken keys, found secondhand. Some notes didn't work. Some were out of tune. She learned to adjust, to remember which keys to avoid. Late at night, when everyone slept, she pressed keys softly, imagining a real piano beneath her fingers. Her fingers hurt often, but she didn't complain. Pain felt familiar. Giving up felt worse. Back at school, the teachers planned the tests carefully. They wanted to separate talent from interest. They believed pressure would reveal the truth. For some students, they chose simple pieces. For others, more complex ones. When her turn came up in their discussions, there was a pause. One teacher suggested giving her a difficult piece. Not to be cruel, but to prove a point. Another agreed. They said it would help her accept reality. They believed failure could be a lesson. She didn't know any of this. She only knew that her name appeared on the list with a piece she had never officially learned in class. When she saw it, her heart dropped. The notes looked heavy on the page. Other students noticed too. Someone laughed quietly. Someone else shook their head. A friend leaned over and whispered that it wasn't fair. She smiled weakly, pretending it didn't matter. Inside, a storm was building. The days leading up to the test felt slow. Each class felt longer than the last. She watched others practice confidently, hearing mistakes turn into progress. She stayed quiet, repeating the piece in her mind, imagining each note, each pause. She knew the risk. She also knew she had no other choice. The teachers watched her closely now, not with support but with expectation of failure. They believed they were being practical. They believed talent should be obvious. They had no idea how much effort hides behind silence. On the morning of the test, she arrived earlier than usual. The classroom was empty. The piano waited at the front, still and patient. She stood there for a long moment, breathing slowly. Then she sat down. Her hands rested on the keys. For the first time, she allowed herself to press them fully. The sound filled the room, soft but real. Her eyes closed. For a few seconds there was no test, no judgment, no fear. Only music. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. She stopped immediately, stood up, and returned to her seat as if nothing had happened. When others entered, she looked the same as always. Quiet, invisible. But inside her, something had changed. She knew what she could do. She didn't know if anyone else would ever see it. And that uncertainty weighed heavily as the test day moved closer. The stage was being set, though no one realized it yet. What was meant to expose weakness was slowly moving toward revealing something far more powerful. And it all began with a girl everyone thought they understood, but never truly tried to know. The day of the piano test came quietly, like any other day at school, but the air felt heavier. Students whispered as they entered the classroom, some carrying folders with music sheets, some carrying nervous smiles. She walked in slowly, hands folded over her bag, her steps measured. She could hear the soft shuffling of papers and the low murmur of teachers giving instructions. She did not speak. She never spoke when she felt her heart racing. When it was her turn to play, the teacher called her name in a calm voice that sounded ordinary but carried more weight than usual. Her stomach tightened, and her fingers tingled with nerves. The piece she was asked to play looked complicated, the notes dense and fast. Some students glanced at her with curiosity, others with doubt. A few even smirked quietly, certain that she would fail. She walked toward the piano slowly, as if each step required careful thought. The room seemed to grow quieter with every move she made. She sat on the bench, adjusted the height slightly, and placed her hands over the keys. She took a deep breath and let it out slowly. The room held its breath with her, though no one realized it. The teachers who had planned this test watched with hidden smiles. They believed she would stumble, would freeze, would reveal the truth they expected, that she was not talented. They did not know her story, the late nights, the broken keyboard at home, the countless hours of silent practice. To them, she was just a quiet student who seemed unremarkable. Her fingers hovered over the keys for a moment longer than necessary, feeling the smooth surface beneath her touch. She recalled the nights when she had practiced in the dark, imagining the sound of a grand piano beneath her hands. Every note she remembered, every mistake she had learned from, every lesson she had absorbed alone in silence came back to her now. She could feel the music ready inside her, waiting for release. Then she pressed the first key. The sound rang out clearly, stronger than anyone expected. It was not loud, but it carried emotion, precision, and control. The notes flowed carefully, yet naturally, forming a melody that seemed to speak without words. The students around her froze, watching in disbelief. Some teachers opened their mouths to say something, but no words came out. The piece she was playing was meant to challenge her beyond her level, yet she handled it as though it were familiar territory. With every note, her confidence grew. The teachers who had intended this test as a lesson in humility for her found themselves holding their breath. They realized, slowly and painfully, that she was not just capable. She was exceptional. Her fingers moved with accuracy and grace. Every key struck with intention. The mistakes she might have made at home during practice were gone, replaced by a performance that felt both natural and powerful. The classroom had become quiet except for the music. Students leaned forward, forgetting to whisper, forgetting to check their phones, forgetting everything but the sound coming from the piano. She could feel eyes on her, but she did not let it distract her. She focused entirely on the music, letting it carry her, letting it show what words could not. Every note told a story of her struggle, her patience, and her determination. Some of the teachers began to exchange worried looks. They had thought they understood her abilities, but now it was clear they had misjudged her completely. She was not a quiet, uninterested student. She was a hidden talent, someone who had been underestimated because she did not seek attention or praise. They had set a test to prove her limits, but instead, she was showing them something far greater. The piece ended, and for a moment there was silence. No one spoke, no one moved. The weight of what they had just witnessed hung in the room. Then, slowly, the students began to clap, first hesitantly, then with growing enthusiasm. The sound was genuine, filled with admiration and surprise. Some teachers clapped too, though it was clear that the lesson they had planned had completely backfired. She rose from the bench, not looking at anyone directly. Her face was calm, her expression unreadable, but inside, her heart raced with relief and pride. She had faced a challenge that had been designed to break her, and instead, she had proven herself in a way that no one had expected. She had turned doubt into respect, silence into voice, weakness into strength. The other students came closer, curious and respectful now. They asked quietly how she had learned to play so well. She smiled softly, not wanting to explain the nights spent alone, the small keyboard at home, the hours of practice that had gone unnoticed. Some things were private, and this was hers. She let them admire her performance without words, letting the music speak for itself. The teachers, on the other hand, were forced to reconsider their approach. They had intended this test as a measure of ability and as a way to separate talent from interest. They had believed that pressure and expectation would reveal flaws, but instead, they had witnessed mastery. They learned, perhaps for the first time, that true talent often hides in quiet places, that effort and dedication can go unseen for years, and that underestimating someone based on appearance or demeanor is a mistake that can be humbling. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Some students continued to talk about her performance, sharing the story with others, spreading the word about the quiet girl who had stunned everyone with her first note. She returned to her seat, composed as ever, but inside, she felt a sense of liberation. She had faced the challenge head-on, and it had changed how everyone saw her. After school, she lingered by the piano, touching the keys lightly one more time before leaving. It was not about showing off or proving herself anymore. It was about connection. Music had been her companion through loneliness, struggle, and quiet perseverance. Now it was also a bridge to others, a way for them to understand, even a little, the depth of what she had lived and felt. Her story spread slowly through the school, whispered in hallways and shared in classrooms. It became clear that she was not just another student. She was someone who had faced doubt, challenge, and expectation, and had met it all with courage and skill. The teachers who had tested her on purpose learned a lesson they would not forget. Sometimes what appears quiet and small can hold more strength than the loudest voices. As she walked home that day, the sun casting long shadows across the street, she felt a sense of peace. She had met the challenge, faced the judgment, and come out stronger. She had proven something to herself more than anyone else. And that feeling, quiet but powerful, stayed with her, ready for whatever came next. The moment she pressed the first key during the test, something changed in the room. It was not loud or flashy, but the sound had a presence, carried clarity, control, and emotion that could not be ignored. Teachers stopped speaking. Students stopped moving. For a heartbeat, it was as if time itself paused to listen. Her fingers moved with purpose, each note deliberate, yet flowing naturally. The melody unfolded like a story, full of tension, release, and quiet strength. As she continued, the initial surprise in the room transformed into awe. People who had doubted her could no longer do so. They could see and hear her talent, something that had been hidden in plain sight. Every note revealed discipline and patience. She had practiced alone for years, often with nothing but an old, imperfect keyboard. Yet now her hands seemed to remember perfectly how to bring music to life. The test designed to challenge her beyond her limits had instead allowed her to shine. She felt the room watching, but she did not let it distract her. She focused entirely on the music, on the movement of her fingers, on the vibration of the keys beneath her touch. Each chord, each pause, each rise and fall of the melody carried part of her story. Some students leaned closer, their faces wide with disbelief. Some teachers held their hands together, their expressions frozen between admiration and shock. They had not expected this. No one had. Her mind drifted briefly to the nights she had spent practicing at home. She remembered pressing keys softly in the dark when everyone else was asleep. She remembered making mistakes, correcting them, learning to adjust when notes did not sound right. She remembered longing for a real piano, for lessons she could not afford, for someone to notice her dedication. And now all of that effort had found its voice, loud and clear, in this very room. The music continued, moving with increasing confidence. Her body relaxed as she allowed herself to feel the rhythm and emotion fully. She was no longer just a student taking a test. She was a musician telling a story through her fingers. Each note carried years of hidden work and quiet struggle. Each chord revealed more than technical skill. It revealed resilience, patience, and heart. Some of the students who had doubted her before began to look at her differently. They whispered to one another, pointing out her hand movements, the precision of her notes, the emotion that seemed to pour from the keys. A few students felt inspired, realizing that talent is not always obvious at first glance. Others felt regret, recognizing that they had judged her unfairly based on appearances alone. The teachers had started the test thinking they would teach a lesson about reality, about limits, about the difference between effort and natural ability. They had chosen the most difficult piece, hoping to expose a flaw, a hesitation, a mistake. But now they realized they had underestimated her completely. The quiet student they thought had no chance was performing with skill and confidence they had never imagined. Their plan had backfired spectacularly. She noticed some of the teachers' expressions changing. There was a flicker of disbelief, followed by respect. Some even looked uncomfortable, realizing that their assumptions had been wrong. They had intended to challenge her, but she had turned the situation into an example of true talent and dedication. The lesson they thought they were teaching was being reversed. She was teaching them now. Her fingers flew over the keys, moving faster, yet never losing control. She maintained the melody, the flow, the emotion. She did not need to look at the sheet music. She had memorized it, but more than memorized, it had become part of her. The piano was no longer an object. It was a companion, a friend, a way to communicate what words could not. She let herself sink into that feeling, letting the music speak everything she had kept inside for so long. The room, once filled with expectation and doubt, was now filled with silence and attention. No one dared interrupt. No one whispered. The only sound was the piano and the steady, confident movement of her hands. Each note carried a quiet power, a statement that talent and effort cannot be denied, no matter how invisible they may seem. She could feel her heart pounding, but not with fear. It was excitement, pride, and relief. She was proving something not just to others but to herself. She had faced a challenge, one designed to test her limits, and she was exceeding them. The music allowed her to express everything she had stored away. The struggles, the dreams, the long nights of practice, and the hope that someone, someday, would notice. As she reached the end of the piece, she slowed, letting the final notes linger in the air. The sound hung, reverberating through the room, holding everyone's attention just a little longer. For a moment, it felt like the room itself was paying homage to her effort and dedication. The silence that followed was heavy, filled with respect and astonishment. Slowly, the students began to clap. The applause started small, tentative, as if they were unsure they were allowed to express their amazement. Then it grew louder, stronger, filled with genuine admiration. Some students smiled at her, some whispered words of praise, and some even looked a little embarrassed for having doubted her. The music had bridged the gap between doubt and respect. The teachers, too, joined in the applause, though their claps were more restrained. Their lesson had gone in an unexpected direction. They had planned to reveal weakness, but instead they had witnessed brilliance. They had assumed talent would be loud, obvious, and effortless. They had been wrong. Talent often hides, quiet and unnoticed, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. She rose from the piano, her face calm and composed, hiding the rush of emotions inside. Her hands were steady, her posture relaxed. She did not need to speak or explain herself. The music had done that for her. The test had ended, but what she had shown went beyond any evaluation or grade. She had shown strength, determination, and heart. Students came closer, still amazed, asking questions softly, wanting to understand how she had learned, how she had practiced, how she had managed such control. She answered modestly, smiling quietly, never fully revealing the nights of solitude and struggle. Some stories are too personal, she thought, and some victories are theirs to own quietly. The teachers, however, were left to reflect. They had believed the test would expose limits, but it had exposed something far more valuable. The power of persistence, the depth of hidden talent, and the importance of seeing beyond appearances. They had underestimated her because she was quiet, because she did not seek attention, and because she had carried her passion in silence. Their lesson had been turned around, and they had learned humility in the process. After the class ended, she lingered a moment, touching the keys lightly, feeling the vibrations, the resonance. It was not about showing off or seeking praise. It was about connection, about letting the music speak her story without needing words. The students had seen it, the teachers had seen it, but most importantly, she had seen it herself. She had confronted doubt, pressure, and expectation, and she had emerged stronger. Walking home, she reflected on the day. She felt a quiet pride that was different from happiness or excitement. It was deeper, rooted in the knowledge that she had faced a challenge that could have broken her and had instead allowed her to rise. She thought about the future, about the music waiting to be played, about the doors that might open now that others could see her ability. Yet, she knew her journey was not over. There were more pieces to learn, more challenges to face, more nights of practice ahead. She understood that her story was just beginning. The piano had given her a voice, the test had given her courage, and the experience had given her proof that quiet strength could speak louder than words. From that day on, she would never doubt herself again, and those who had tested her would never underestimate her again. The first note had shocked everyone, but the music that followed had revealed the truth. Her talent, patience, and heart were unstoppable. After the performance, the truth began to emerge slowly. Students who had watched her play could not stop talking about it. They shared stories about her quiet dedication, how she had spent hours practicing alone at home, and how the broken keyboard she had used for years had never stopped her from learning. They realized that what they had thought was weakness was actually extraordinary effort. They began to understand that talent could be hidden behind silence and humility. The teachers, too, were forced to confront their assumptions. They had expected her to falter, to show signs of inability under pressure, but instead, she had demonstrated something they had never seen. Precision, emotion, strength, and control all at once. They began to piece together the reality of her situation. The nights she spent practicing, the small keyboard she had used in secret, the patience and resilience she had shown through years of unnoticed effort. It became clear that their test had done more than just assess skill. It had revealed the story of her life, of determination, and of hope. Some students approached her after class. Their voices were quiet, respectful, and full of admiration. They asked how she had learned so much on her own. She smiled gently, not offering full details. Some stories were hers to hold, and she had learned that the right time to share them would come later. For now, the music itself had told enough. The room had listened and understood more than words ever could. The piano that had been just an instrument before had become a bridge between her and the world. Through it, she had shown who she was without boasting, without demanding recognition. The teachers realized that true skill is not measured by confidence in the spotlight, but by persistence in silence. They felt a mixture of respect, regret, and humility. They had misjudged her, and now they understood the cost of their assumptions. Parents who had heard the story through whispers in the hallways began to notice a change in how students treated her. Some had ignored her before, some had doubted her, and some had simply not paid attention. Now, people sought her out, curious to see the quiet student who had amazed everyone with her first note. She remained calm, unbothered by the attention, yet inside, she felt a quiet satisfaction. She had always known her own strength, and now others were starting to see it too. Her life outside school had not changed immediately. The challenges at home remained. There were still long nights, responsibilities, and moments of worry. But the recognition she received at school gave her a new sense of possibility. She realized that the world might not always notice effort in silence, but when it does, it can create respect, understanding, and connection. This small acknowledgement became a foundation for her to build on. She continued to practice in secret, refining her skills, learning new pieces, exploring emotion and depth in her music. The piano had become a place where she could express herself fully, without interruption, without judgment. The keys carried her feelings, her stories, and her dreams. Each session strengthened not just her skill, but her confidence and her awareness of her own potential. Teachers who had once doubted her began to change their approach. They realized that their methods of judging students by appearances and reactions were flawed. Talent often hides, they now understood, and it takes careful attention and open-mindedness to recognize it. They started paying more attention to quiet students, looking for the hidden dedication that might otherwise go unnoticed. She became an example not just for students, but for educators as well. Some students tried to imitate her dedication, inspired by the story of how a quiet, unnoticed girl had stunned everyone with her first note. They began to see that practice, patience, and persistence mattered more than natural talent alone. They learned that it was possible to achieve greatness even without constant praise or attention. Her example quietly changed the classroom culture, encouraging effort and respect over judgment and assumption. Over time, the teachers arranged for her to have more opportunities to play. They realized that her talent deserved recognition, not to boost anyone's ego, but to allow her to grow and to inspire others. She accepted these opportunities modestly, not seeking the spotlight, but embracing the chance to continue her journey. Every performance became more than a test. It was a conversation, a story told without words, and a lesson for those who listened. Through all of this, she remained humble. She knew that recognition was not the goal. Her goal was growth, connection, and expression. Music was her companion, her refuge, and her voice. When she played, she shared parts of herself that could not be spoken aloud, and through that, she touched others' lives. Her story was not about fame or accolades. It was about perseverance, quiet strength, and the courage to reveal one's talent, even when no one expects it. By the end of that year, the school had changed in subtle ways. Teachers paid closer attention to quiet students. Classmates looked for effort, not just natural flair. The story of the girl who had stunned everyone with her first piano note became part of the school's memory, a reminder that talent and determination often hide in silence. And she continued her path, guided by her own determination, her own love for music, and the quiet understanding that her efforts could speak louder than any words ever could. Each day brought new challenges, but also new opportunities. She approached them with the same focus she brought to the piano. Patient, determined, and undeterred by others' expectations. She understood that success was not about proving something to anyone else, but about proving to herself that dedication and hard work could create beauty and strength. Her life continued, shaped by music, guided by resilience, and enriched by the understanding that quiet effort can change the way the world sees you. The days after the performance were different. People treated her with a new kind of respect, though they were careful not to overwhelm her with attention. Students who had once ignored her now asked questions about her music, eager to understand how she had learned, how she practiced, and how she remained so calm under pressure. She answered politely but softly, never boasting. The music had spoken for her, and words were not always needed. Her life continued, balancing schoolwork, responsibilities at home, and her growing connection with the piano. She found small moments to practice whenever she could, whether before classes, during breaks, or late at night. Each session strengthened her skills and deepened her understanding of music. She learned to express emotion in new ways, to let her feelings flow through the keys, and to tell stories that words alone could never capture. The teachers who had once tested her on purpose now treated her differently. They no longer underestimated her or assumed she needed to be pushed into reality. Instead, they offered support, guidance, and encouragement. They provided opportunities for her to perform, to explore new pieces, and to develop her skills further. They had learned an important lesson. Talent and effort often hide, and underestimating someone can mean missing a story worth hearing. Other students began to change as well. They noticed that quiet effort often went unnoticed and that true skill and determination were not always visible at first glance. Some started practicing more seriously, inspired by her dedication. Some approached her for advice, hoping to learn how to manage practice and focus. She shared what she could, encouraging them without showing off, making sure they understood that growth comes from consistency, patience, and love for what you do. Her music became more than just a skill. It became a part of her identity, a way to communicate feelings and thoughts that were too complex for words. The piano was a companion, a friend, and a means to express herself fully. Each note carried a piece of her story, and as she played, people listened, learned, and sometimes felt emotions they could not explain. The music created a connection between her and the world, one that was quiet but powerful. She faced challenges along the way. Some pieces were difficult. Some days were tiring, with responsibilities at home or stress from schoolwork. But she approached each challenge like she did the piano. Patiently, with determination, and with focus. She understood that growth is never easy and that success is measured by persistence, not instant recognition. Each struggle became a lesson, each effort a step toward improvement. Over time, she began performing in small school events and gatherings. The audience often included students, teachers, and parents. She did not seek the spotlight, but she allowed herself to be seen and heard, understanding that sharing her talent could inspire others. Her performances were not about impressing people, but about telling stories, expressing emotions, and showing the beauty of dedication and practice. Her life continued to balance between practice, study, and home responsibilities, but the recognition she received at school gave her a sense of possibility. She realized that effort, patience, and love for what you do can open doors and create opportunities that were once unimaginable. Her quiet strength became visible not through words but through her actions, her music, and the respect she earned from those who witnessed it. She remained humble despite her growing recognition. She understood that her journey was ongoing, that there was always more to learn, more to practice, more to experience. Her music was not a trophy or a prize. It was a reflection of her life, her emotions, and her resilience. She cherished the moments when she could play alone, when she could lose herself in the keys and the melody, feeling every note as it resonated within her. The teachers, now wiser, continued to provide guidance and support. They encouraged her to explore different styles, to challenge herself, and to develop her own interpretation of music. They had learned from her that talent is often hidden and that effort is sometimes invisible. Their respect for her grew, not just for her skill, but for her discipline, patience, and quiet strength. Her classmates also learned a lesson. They began to understand that judging someone by appearances or assumptions is unfair and often misleading. They saw that true ability is not always loud or obvious and that those who work diligently behind the scenes can achieve greatness. Her example inspired others to pursue their own passions with dedication and focus. Through it all, she continued to grow as a musician and as a person. Each day brought new challenges, new opportunities, and new experiences. She faced them with patience, determination, and the quiet confidence that comes from knowing your own strength. She understood that success is not about proving yourself to others, but about achieving personal growth and expressing your true self. Her story became part of the school's memory. Students and teachers would tell the tale of the quiet girl who stunned everyone with her first piano note, who practiced in silence, and who showed that dedication and talent could not be hidden forever. Her example remained a reminder that effort, patience, and love for what you do are more powerful than judgment, assumptions, or doubt. As she continued her journey, she remained true to herself. She did not seek fame or attention. She played because it was her voice, her passion, and her way of connecting with the world. Her life was shaped by music, guided by resilience, and enriched by the understanding that quiet effort, determination, and patience can change the way the world sees you and, more importantly, the way you see yourself. She understood that life would continue to bring challenges, but she was ready. The piano had taught her discipline, patience, and emotional expression. The test had taught her courage, confidence, and the power of proving oneself through action. And through it all, she had learned that recognition is valuable, but it is not the goal. The goal is growth, expression, and the quiet strength that comes from dedication and love for what you do. In the end, she played not for grades, not for attention, and not for praise. She played to express herself, to tell her story, and to honor the years of effort, patience, and resilience that had brought her to this moment. And in doing so, she inspired everyone who listened, leaving a lasting impression that went far beyond a single performance. Her first piano note had stunned everyone, but her journey, her dedication, and her heart left an even deeper mark.